All right, we are live.
Okay.
So we'll just start with the prayer, and so I'll say the prayer.
Okay.
Heavenly Father, we're so grateful that we're able to meet together at this time to discuss what we've learned in this case. We ask you that thy Spirit will be with us, that we'll have our hearts and our mind open to learning, that we will be able to learn from each other and to help teach each other. We're grateful for this opportunity we have, and we ask thee to guide and direct our conversation. And we say these things in the name of thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Okay. Do you have a spiritual thought that you want to share?
Sure.
Okay.
I have a spiritual thought. I forgot about that. I do have a spiritual thought. 1 second, let me find it.
Okay, while you're looking, I need to run down and get this laptop charger because the battery is totally going to die. So give me like 2 seconds.
Okay.
Okay, almost there. Sorry.
No worries.
I would just hate for us to have to do it again because the battery dies. Okay, we're good now. Okay, spiritual thought.
Okay, so my spiritual thought is a scripture in Isaiah 55, and it's verses 8 and 9. It says, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, saith the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." And this is like my all-time favorite scripture because I sometimes just feel like I know best. And it just kind of puts the kibosh on it. Like, he just is straight up saying, like, I know more than you, and I can see more than you, and so you need to trust me, basically. And so, I don't know, whenever, like, I go through difficult things, this is kind of the scripture I turn to.
That's cool. Yeah, I have a real innate personality of where like truth is very black and white to me. There's kind of like no middle ground. Like I'm fine debating it, but it's like once I feel like something's a truth, it's really difficult to change my opinion.
Yeah.
And so I've kind of approached religion in that way too. And it's kind of come to my detriment a little bit because I do end up learning things where I'm like, oh, yeah, I wasn't really right in that.
Yeah.
It's kind of nice to have that though, but that's a good scripture. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so vote individually. What grade would you give the founders of Rent the Runway for their work starting Rent the Runway? What specifically did you see the most effective? What did the founders stumble? And what should they have done differently? Does the order in which they took specific actions matter? Okay, so what would you grade the founders?
They were very, I don't know, like a grade, I'd probably give them a B. That would be my grade. I honestly, they were very determined, which is why I would give them such a high grade. I mean, if you look at the timeline that they did everything, they did it all very quickly, which is good, but I also feel like they were so rushed that they could have done more to be more prepared.
Yeah.
They were when they launched the company. I mean, it was like, I don't even think it was a full year before they had their idea and launched the company. It was like all kind of in 2009, I think. I don't have my.
Yeah, I think it was.
Yeah, it was from,
Well, it was
December 2008.
Yeah,
And then
December 2008.
Then they launched January 2009. I mean, that's still about a year.
Yeah, and like in other I mean, I guess if you're dealing with a website, like you can probably get a startup company a lot quicker when you're dealing with just an online kind of thing. But I mean, they had to go in and find inventory. Like they had to have product. It wasn't like them sitting down and, you know, knitting a bunch of hats or making some jewelry or something that they were dependent upon their own production skills to be able to have the inventory. Like they were looking for outside sources to bring their inventory in with designers. And that's a big market to kind of jump into. But also, a lot of these designers were like, who are you? Why are you doing this? Like, why would I want to do this? And that kind of thing. So I'm surprised they actually were as successful as they were in such a short period of time. But my grade would probably be like a B plus. I think that if they could have maybe not tried to jump in so quickly, like right on the 2009 Christmas season, you know, holiday season, that maybe if they would have waited until 2010, they probably could have had more designers in line and a better business plan. But then again, they just, you know, they jumped in it, and I think they did surprisingly well compared for the short period of time that they had to develop their product. So
yeah, no, I would agree with that. Specifically, what I saw was most effective is basically just their motivation. To do it that quickly takes a lot of hard work.
mm-hmm.
And they hit the steps pretty good. I mean, I feel like, so kind of moving on to where did they stumble? I feel like they should have done more testing. They only really tested their products 3 times.
Mm-hmm.
Twice was on 2 different college campuses, and then one was an online one where they got an 8% return, which I think it's good they tested it online, but they did 2 live testings, and I feel like they should have done more online testing just to see how that's going to work, because there's no way that one online test could answer all the questions that they would have about how their product would be. I just remember when I had to do like our little company on campus, we had to do IBC.
Mm-hmm.
We were always validating things. We were always going out and asking questions and just trying to find out what people wanted and how to best do things. And they just, I feel like they were like, oh, people want the dresses. We got a 35% rental and a 75% rental and then an 8% online. And that was better than we thought. So we're good to go. I feel like they just kind of, I don't know, they just rushed. They rushed through everything.
And I kind of have mixed emotions a little bit on that, because I think that sometimes entrepreneurs, they're like have so much conviction about their idea, and they just like, they kind of don't want to deviate from the plan. They don't want to take any type of like, okay, let's take a step back and figure out where we need to go, or do something different because maybe it's not getting the results that we want as fast as we want. But I kind of feel like they were very convinced that their idea was going to work, and it really didn't matter who came in and said, maybe you need to take this different approach, because they like were nailed, you know, just into like, this is how this is going to work, because there's one other company that's been successful in this and we're just going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I would just, as far as like what I saw their most effective was kind of like what I said, just their tenacity to keep going. Like it was, you know, hell or high water, we're going to make this work and it's going to work. And especially with the vision that we have, it's not really, we're not going to deviate from other things. And then I think we kind of covered where did the founders stumble. It was just the timeline. I think the timeline was like way too short. And I think that, you know, they approached some really good designers, but I think maybe they should have tried to approach more, because they probably would have been a little bit more successful rather than just approaching a few. They could have tried to get, you know, meetings with like 20 of them and just kept going. And they could have probably had a larger inventory with more designers if they would have just kind of, you know, just tried to make it explode, more or less.
Yeah, I feel like what they could have done differently, I feel like they should have been more prepared going into the fashion industry. It seems like one of them had a little bit of background, but not a whole lot. but I mean, they talked about when they would go speak to the different designers, they all just kind of looked at them like, you guys are just girls wanting to sell and buy dresses
Yeah, you
without
guys
a
are
lot of
just
respect for him. And
shoppers.
it wasn't until later that they kind of perfected their spiel that they give to the designers. And I think that if they would have taken more time in the beginning to prepare that and to really like nail what they wanted and what their mission was and what they needed from designers, then when they went to go and talk to them, they would have been able to do a little better job and probably would have got more designers to sign with them. Just because, I mean, if you can't take someone seriously, you're not going to work with them to give them your products.
Yeah, that's an aspect that I kind of didn't think of that they should have nailed their presentation down. And if they would have had that presentation, just, like have you ever watched the show? It was like that entrepreneur show. I think it was called like Shark. No, what was it?
Yeah, Shark Tank.
Yes, yeah, Shark Tank, where people who came in with like a very strong presentation, they seem to be able to sell to the investors a lot better because they're very confident in their material and their presentation, of where some of the other ones weren't so confident, but they may have been, the people could sense their passion about it, even though they weren't good presenters. And that kind of what sold them. So I think if they could have somehow had a stronger presentation mixed with, really showing their passion and excitement about what it was, that they would have been able to, get more and nail more people down for this kind of thing and have people understand what they were going after. In that. Okay, I think we've already talked about what they should have done differently.
Yeah.
And then does the order in which they took specific actions matter?
I kind of talked about it. I think they should have been more prepared.
Yeah, and I think the order that you do things, yeah, I think it does matter. But I don't think that they necessarily did things in an order that I probably would have changed. I mean, it worked. But they could have been more prepared. They could have made out like not necessarily a timeline, but more of like a map. But then that has to always, I mean, it kind of has to be a living map. It has to be things that would change based upon, whether they got meetings or they had to go here, or they had to go there. So it would be an ever evolving process, even though you kind of have an idea of what you want to do.
Yeah, one thing that I kind of disagreed with that they did was they developed what was it? They recruited a board of advisors. And I thought this was kind of different. I personally wouldn't have done that because I just feel like that makes more bosses. It just reminds me of the saying, like, there's too many chiefs and not enough Indians. And I feel like with the board of advisors, you now have to please this whole board of people. And the more people you have to please, the more complicated it's going to get. And I just think of the last case we read, where he only had 8 people in his whole company. I don't remember what case it was, but that was it. He had 8 people working for him.
Are you talking about the Dropbox one?
Yeah, the Dropbox one.
Yeah.
And they were just very successful. And she just seemed, I mean, these 2 girls, they just seemed to be like, I just don't feel like that was necessary. That's just something that I wouldn't have done, was gotten a board of advisors. And I mean, I didn't really see a purpose for them necessarily. I mean, maybe they had a purpose, but I wouldn't have done it.
I think I probably would have. They may have been better off like getting a couple of their friends, or like, she came up with the whole concept because her sister was an accessory, buyer, but she wanted to buy this dress for her wedding, and she's like, okay, now you're buying a $1,500 dress for your wedding, and you're going to wear it once, where you could have technically rented a dress and, saved money, or, that kind of deal. I think she kind of should have went after, I mean, they could have went after like having some people giving them advice or having their opinions on people that were more like her sister's, situation of, okay, so, and even like in the college campus, they could have taken some, and surveys, or just even sat there and talked to them and asked them like, a set of questions of, why wouldn't this work for you? Why would this work for you? Why does it interest you? Why does it not? What type of stuff do you want? I mean, kind of like an informal survey. Or even the customers that did rent from them, they could have asked them for, like comments of like, if you could do this process over again, what would you see differently? And then taking that information and probably save them, a lot of time, because then it was direct customer feedback as opposed to kind of taking people that are, a couple of degrees of separation from the actual environment.
Well, and another thing that really, sorry, I feel like I'm just hammering on these people. But another thing that I thought was really weird is they talk about their target market being people who are going to be attending black tie events that are kind of like a little bit older. They already are pulling in a lot of money. And then they go and they test at a college campus, at 2 college campuses. And I mean, to me, I was like, hey, that doesn't sound like your target market. You talk previously about these black tie event women who are, I don't know, anywhere from like 35 to 55 that are going to these. But then you go and you test all of your dresses and everything on 2 different college campuses. Those are 2 complete different target markets. So I don't know if they switched somewhere and I missed it, but I mean, I would have tested somewhere where I could actually reach my target market.
My thought process behind that, why they went to the college campus, is it was kind of like creating, it was like opening the door to a new generation of people who are going to use this service. And so it's like, if you kind of hook them, like in their last year of college, and you're like, oh, you're going to graduate, you're going to go out and get a job, you're going to be making $50,000, $60,000 a year, but you're not doing enough to be able to buy designer things, but you're going to be attending a social events, friends are going to be getting married, you're going to want to have these dresses, that kind of deal. That they were it was kind of like getting, I'm trying to think of like an appropriate analogy. It was kind of like getting your teenagers into makeup through, fun colors and stuff like that. But then if you can get them into the makeup line, then all of a sudden as an adult, they're like, wow, I really loved Maybelline, so I'm just going to keep using Maybelline forever, rather than kind of, going into more other things. I think they were just trying to grab their next generation of customer.
Yeah, but then wouldn't that make that their target market?
Yeah, it is too, but
that's what I'm like. I don't know. I just don't feel like they really defined their target market, and then they're like, oh, these are our target market, and then, oh, well, maybe these are our target market. And it just bothered me that they specified in the case that their target market was going to be women who are most likely going to be attending black tie events. And they wanted to reach other people as well, for weddings and prom and graduation and those kind of things. But they specified that the black tie event women were their target market. And I was just kind of like, well.
And they should have specified that.
Really test your target market then.
It's like 16-year-olds that are attending anything that you need a fancy dress for, 16 and up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, they obviously did well in their first 3 months of operations, because that's about all that they are at, is when the case sentence is like 3 months.
Well, and they did kind of hold these 2 things too at Yale and Harvard, which are some of, like the 2 most expensive universities in the United States. So typically people there have money and they have expendable income, even though they're college students. So, and, also, can't remember what her name is. I mean, Jennifer, was it Jen? One of them was actually a Harvard MBA graduate. So I think it was kind of like she was going back. Oh, they both were. They met in Harvard Business School. So I think they were kind of going back to their home roots and like looking for maybe, their professors to be like, hey, here's our idea, help us with this. And also if they're targeting other Harvard MBA students, they're in the midst of learning this program, learning the ins and outs of business and entrepreneurship. So why not go back to these people that may have some fresh ideas that can help us do stuff too?
Yeah.
But it was I agree. It's kind of weird that they, they couldn't really pick their target market, but Kmart is a company that is like that exactly, where Target kind of had Target and Walmart have specifically picked their genres that they want to stick with. And Kmart like couldn't decide whether it was wanted to go with like the Walmart group of where it was like, hey, I want to walk in here and I just want to do one-stop shopping and I want everything at a bargain. And then you kind of have the Target group of people that are like, I don't really care that I'll pay a little bit more money because I want the Target experience with a little higher quality clothes, the nicer store, that kind of deal. And Kmart kept shifting back and forth between this idea of which their target market was, and that's what caused them to fail. Like
they aren't even here anymore.
Yeah. So I mean, that's because they couldn't decide their identity and their brand and sticking to the market and staying with it. That's kind of what made them not viable in the market, because of the fact that they couldn't decide who they were and what they were doing.
Yeah.
So it's interesting, but that's kind of, I feel like they were kind of like riding Kmart's train of where they just couldn't figure out what they were and what they were doing.
Yeah.
But I think they're also at that point they were also a young enough company that they could deviate and kind of figure out which path they wanted to go on and then really go for.
Yeah, I think that's fine. I think changing your mind while you're developing the company is totally fine and good, because then you're actually willing to bend. But I don't know. I would be a nervous investor, honestly, if I was investing in them, just because of the way they kind of run things. It just, to me, doesn't seem very well organized personally. But I don't know. I wouldn't probably invest with them.
Well, and it also makes me wonder that if you did have an investor, say, okay, what's your target market? And you would go, well, we don't exactly know. This is what our idea is, but we think it's going to morph into this just because of the fact that this is, fashion and all that kind of stuff. I think I'd probably respect them more for that if they came in and said, this is what we're envisioning, but we think it's going to go this way, and kind of have it be an ever evolving type deal. Yeah. Okay. Number 4, have the founders of Rent the Runway validated their business model? What is the business model? Be specific in the reading. Highlight 4 components of a business model: a CVP, a GTM, TOM, or CFF. I don't remember this.
I didn't either. Oh, wait.
Did you look up what the business models were? Because I don't remember having this in reading.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So the first one, CVP, is the customer value proposition.
Mm-hmm.
So basically what they have to offer. One second, I lost my spot. What they have to offer the customer. And I think what they're offering their customer is a high quality designer dress. The dress you buy to only wear once, at a low cost, that you rent it and return it. So you pay a tenth of the price to wear the dress you want for that event, and then you send it back.
Yeah.
So that would be my opinion of the CVP. I don't know if you have anything else that you want to add to that.
No, I think that's pretty on because basically it's a customer focused thing. The dresses sitting on a rack is not going to do anything. It's all about the customer.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And then, okay, so the GTM is the go-to-market strategy. So
Okay.
as far as I understood, and for their go-to-market strategy, and maybe I miss things because I skim cases
Mm-hmm.
to look for the information I need. For their going to market, they built their website and they had an email list of, I want to say it was either 1,000 or 5,000 people. Oh, I can't remember, but they had an email list with so many people that they initially invited to join this, and then you could be referred to it, or you could join a wait list to be added to it. And so that's kind of how they went into the market, which was smart because with their email list of so many people,
Mm-hmm.
it kind of built that foundation of I cannot think.
It's a referral based business. So
Yeah,
I think they did their initial. I was just looking for the numbers, but we'll just make it up.
it was either 1,000 or 5,000. I can't remember.
Yeah, okay, so when RTR launched, the company had 30,000 names in its email database.
How much was it? Sorry.
They had 30,000 names in their email database when they launched. So in November of 2009, they had about 5,000 invited members, one per week. It was 1 week prior, it was a full public launch. And then, so they had 5,000 initially, and then when it launched, they had 30,000. I don't know how that ended up happening. But if I remember the case correctly, it was more that they kind of had like their initial group of people that they were inviting, and then they said that you can refer as many people. So that's what they were hoping would happen. Is so then by December they had 50,000 on a waiting list. So it was.
Well, that was for dresses. That's 50,000 on a waiting list for dresses.
That's insane to me. Like that number is just mind-boggling. So, but I think that I remember how they did it is like they had their initial group of people that they invited, and I don't know how they initially elected that because I don't think that it said how they found those initial groups of people. But then they said, okay, if somebody makes a comment on your dress, do a referral. And I bet there was some type of referral program of where it was, if you refer 10 people and they all sign up and actually purchase, then you can get a dress for free or something. Like that's how a lot of referral programs go. I'm guessing even though they probably didn't state that in here, which I don't believe that they did, there was probably some type of referral program of where you could get oh yeah, it's right here. I forgot. About half of the referrals came via member offer, which provided members with a $20 account credit for each friend they referred after the friend's first rental shipped. Yeah. So 60% of new members had been acquired directly through the public efforts during the first 2 months of the launch, and 40% came through word of mouth referrals. So 40% of their business came from word of mouth referrals. That's actually pretty big.
That's a high referral number, yeah.
Yeah. So I guess the next one is TOM.
It is target operating model. So basically how they plan to operate. And it talks about that. I can't remember exactly where it talks about it, but they had a lot of issues. Basically, they had their warehouse building and they would just go and tag a dress, and they had to do 2 dresses to ensure the sizing, and then they would just tag it for whoever it was going to be sent to and then send it off and then wait for it to come back. I mean, that's basically because they had a lot of problems with their operations. That's kind of one of the main issues in this case is, are they going to fix operations?
Yeah.
So
I get all my classes merged together, but I can't remember if it was this class or another class that I was reading this report for, but it was talking about operations, of how it seems like businesses don't look at operations. Like there isn't a chief, maybe there is a chief operations officer. I think this has been maybe a change, but there wasn't like somebody who was into the nitty gritty of how like the operations worked. It was always like, oh yeah, if we do this, then it's going to increase our numbers. They're more focused on numbers, and they were like on not having repetitive actions to be able to make their operations smoother.
mm-hmm.
And this, I think that the way that they're shipping, they're receiving, their inventory system, that kind of deal, like it wasn't nailed down to where it was easy to use, and it was easy to know exactly what was happening at all times. Like you couldn't log into something and say, okay, we have these many dresses out, these are the ones that are expected to come back, and that kind of deal. I don't think that their inventory system was like really that effective to be able to make it.
Yeah, it didn't really talk about it a whole lot, so that's what I don't want. I'm like, according to what's in the case, they did horrible record keeping.
Yeah.
On what's out and in. I'm like, maybe they're leaving stuff out, because if they're not, then they're missing a lot of things they should be recording.
Yeah.
All right, so CFF, it's basically, I think, it's like a cash flow forecast, is what I think it is. And they forecasted to break even. I don't think it was in 2010. Maybe it was. All I know is that they knew they were not going to break even when they had planned to spend, and they wanted to get more funding to expand.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know more about their plans with their cash flow?
I don't remember them talking about a lot about the cash flow. I think in like on page 12 it talks about their issues in January of 2010, and basically they just talked about how they needed to like emphasize improvements in their operation so they can deliver more efficiently and effectively to become profitable. That was more of the warehouse stuff.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of their. I mean, that would help.
Yeah, and then they also wanted to add accessories, and so like the people would get like complete outfits. So you would just get a dress, like you would get shoes, and you get a handbag, and you get jewelry, and like if it was winter, you needed a shawl or a jacket or a coat or something like that. You would get like the whole outfit, the whole look, rather than just send me a little black dress and we'll just figure out what to do with it after that.
Yeah. Yeah, so they definitely, I mean, and honestly, they didn't show us any records of financials, and so that's kind of hard to look at. It's just basically what you can pick up through reading the case, and I feel like if they would have given us a little more on that, maybe well, definitely have issues with it because they are not on track. All right, should we move on to okay, let's see. Key elements, we just covered the key elements of their business model. I feel like we kind of talked about validating a business model, because that was one of my issues that I talked about up in question 3, because I just didn't feel like they validated it quite as well as they should have. But what does it mean to validate a business model? Basically, it means to prove that it's going to work or to test it to see if it's going to work.
Well, and also if it's just working in general, if you're just having, I mean, if your business is being at least at its break-even point, because I think that if a business is being able to pay their bills and survive, not necessarily being profitable, as long as they're at their break-even point, I think that it validates that your business model is working. You know, if you're actually making a huge profit and being able to reinvest in your company and expand it, then I think your business model is even more validated in that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. But if you do like pre-start, so you're in your test time, your test period of your products, I think you would know it's validating. I mean, but I feel like they knew it was validated to the extent that they tested it because it was succeeding. I mean, people were renting, like at Yale, I think was the second university they went to, 75% of the women that were there rented out a dress.
Yeah, so I mean,
So
it validated their idea.
To a point they did, but I mean, I also wonder what was going on campus to make them all rent dresses. There had to be something, if it was like a formal dance or
Yeah,
something, because the timing of when they did their validation makes a big difference too. Because if they're validating all their stuff around New Year's, then they're going to be like, oh, we are going to be so successful. Look at all this data. We're going to rent all these dresses. Or if they then turn around and validate their information in the middle of August, I mean, they're
yeah. I mean, not many people get dressed up to go to a 4th of July party, you know. So I think of like the time that they chose to do their market testing was probably very critical to their success. Where if they would have been, oh yeah, we'll just test it in the middle of finals week, like who's gonna buy a big, you know, I mean, who's gonna rent a nice dress to go take a test? Not that that applies, but I'm just saying that if there's nothing going on, then it's really difficult to actually test something that needs an event for it to go to.
Yeah, and honestly, when it says which elements are validated, I would say the only thing that they really validated, and this is kind of mean, but is that there is a demand for it to a degree.
Well, and I mean, it's kind of a cool thing in thinking, okay, yes, I'm a social person. I have lots of events that I want to go to, you know, and if I can get a dress or some kind of like funky outfit to wear to all these different things, and I never have to like wear the same thing over and over again, there's a market for that, especially even if you can rent it. Because you have, you know, a lot of people that are like, ew, I don't want to wear those sweatpants again. Nobody was, you know, and it's like, even though they're at home and they wear the same thing over, but when they go out, they want to be put on that image and that persona that they never have to wear the same thing twice. And
Yeah,
that's this, especially with the East Coast, like in New York, with that kind of mindset.
Yeah.
So they validated that they have a great idea and there is a market for it. There is an interest in it.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we've done number 4. I think we killed it.
I think we covered it. Yeah, definitely covered it.
Okay.
We want to just review my.
Yeah. So we can, yeah, if you just want to screen share your thing, and then we can do 5 really quickly.
All right. Let's see. Screen share. And then I'm just going to minimize that. Okay. So how many times does a dress need to be rented in order to break even? According to what I have down, it's 8 times. And I got that by, I took the effective cost, which is however items they're sending out, times the cost of the dress. And then you divide that by the contribution margin. So to break even, they need to rent each dress at least 8 times. And I feel like that's a reasonable break even for a dress, because I mean, if a dress that's been worn 8 times can still look brand new.
Yeah.
Basically. So there's not going to be a whole lot of wear and tear in that break even time. How many times has an average dress been rented during the first 2 months of operations 2 times.
Mm-hmm.
So a dress has been rented 2 times. What do these results imply about the viability of the business? In other words, are these promising results or concerns? Well, it's definitely profitable. Your annual profit per item is $256. And I think that's pretty good potential here. One main concern that isn't really addressed in this calculation is a turnover rate.
Mm-hmm.
Because you have to think about the fashion industry. What's in season one Christmas is not going to be, or in style, not in season, in style one year isn't going to be in style the next year because it's always changing. So I would be concerned about their turnover rate because I would be concerned how frequently are they purchasing new dresses to keep up with what people are wanting.
Yeah.
Okay, I turned off my screen share. I think we're done with my Excel file. So
Yeah, that was something that was kind of interesting to me too. Well, also in their rental turnaround time, which I think they kind of briefly talked about it in the case, but I don't remember the exact thing of where if they rent a dress, if somebody rents a dress for a specific night, how soon does the person get it, and then how soon does the person have to turn around and send it back? So if you're have a dress that you have to rent 8 times in 8 times to make it break even, but you're giving them like a 45-day window to return the dress, like from the time that they purchase it, that kind of slows down your thing. So if you can have it to where the person's going out on Friday, by Monday morning they have to ship it back, and then what the hope is by Wednesday you have it cleaned and you can ship it out again come the next day, or even within a couple of days. That's going to be able to make your turnaround rental on the thing a lot better, so you'll be able to rent it more times.
yeah, I think if it did say how their turnaround time was, and I think it was 8 days.
8 days.
I think basically they get the dress for 3 days because you have like a 3-day shipment there, 3 days wear it, 3 days back. I mean, just like on average.
Which I think is is totally reasonable, and I don't think they could have in any way cut it down to be able to make it less. So I remember reading that. I just couldn't remember the exact numbers of what it was. But you also do bring up a good point of the whole, each season is going to have a different dress. Things are going to become popular with each season, each year. And typically the fashion industry, they're always 6 months ahead. So, like people right now, even though we're all buying fall clothes, they're halfway into planning spring right now. And, swimsuit season and, what's coming out and that kind of deal. That's why you start seeing swimsuits in January sitting on the racks, is because they've already spent 6 months doing this. Like they're 6 months in the future already. So there has to be somebody in this team that's kind of out there constantly pursuing, these designers of saying, okay, what do you got going? What's going to come up? Because then you have to match the accessories. You have to have all of this. So they really have to be kind of 6 months ahead also, just kind of one step behind the next season coming out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, well, I think that kind of leads us into number 6, where we vote, should RTR seek to scale quickly now or address operational efficiencies? For those who are in favor, scale quickly, persuade your group that this is the right course of action. And for those who don't, basically make a strong case, convince those who disagree that you have the right decision.
You want to go first?
I don't care. Do you want me to go first?
Yeah.
I don't really care. Okay. I think that they need to focus on their operational efficiencies, to be honest, because I feel like, they want to go buy new dresses, but I feel like if they were more efficient in their operations, they may not need to buy a whole bunch of more dresses, because if they can have their turnaround time be a lot quicker, then they can be renting out the same dress twice as many times in a year. Where if they have dresses like, oh wait, this still needs to go to the cleaners, this still needs to be done. I mean, you're taking a lot of time, or that dress could be making you money, basically, that you're spending just letting it sit there with a tag hanging on it.
Yeah. I can see both sides of it, and I'm kind of like mixed in it, because I think that if they scale up quickly, then they're going to have a great opportunity to like really get themselves into the market even more, to really establish themselves, even though with the operational problems that they have going on. But I think the operational efficiencies need to be addressed, and addressed quickly, because of the fact that if they're going to expand and get big, these efficiencies are going to come back to haunt them. Like, it can be their demise.
Well, yeah, that's it. I think more dresses honestly isn't going to help them.
No.
Because if they, I mean, more dresses, if you can't operate and organize your inventory, more dresses isn't going to help that. You're just going to have more that you need to go through, and you're what's now taking you 8 to 2 to 10 days, well, might end up taking you 2 to 3 weeks to get organized, because you now have 10,000 dresses to go through instead of 1,000 dresses to go through.
I think that they should look at maybe doing like an 80-20 split, of where they don't necessarily scale up quickly, but they do keep their eye on looking at the next season, making sure they're going to try to get some of the designer dresses that are going to be the most popular, but then really focus on their operationals of trying to get their inventory under control, the shipping and receiving, the cleaning, all of that, like really nailing that down. And then slowly kind of add more dresses, so that they can make sure that whatever they're nailing down is going to work at a higher volume of inventory. Because what works at 1,000 may not necessarily work for them at 10,000, especially if they have to find new space, they have to hire more people, they have to do that. So I'd kind of say do both in increments, ideally. I know it's one or the other, but I think that it should just be both kind of slowly in increments, because then they can make sure that they're developing and growing in both sides.
Yeah, I honestly think it would be really hard for them to get more funding like they're wanting to do, because of the fact they've only really been operating 3 months and they already want more funding. Like, that's not a very good sign. At this point in time, I would say they need to focus. I mean, they're through the holidays. Now they need to focus, get their operations cleaned up, take another year or 2, and then see where you're at, if you're profitable or not. Maybe not even another 2 years, but at least make it through a year.
I think making it to the next holiday season. So they should aim to have their operations cleaned up by like June. Have it cleaned up, then have something in place that seems legitimate and solid, and then start thinking about the holiday season coming up. Because some people, they know what they're, it's August and they know what they're doing in Christmas. So just they got to get it cleaned up, and then shift gears into focusing on next holiday season. Because I bet their holiday season is that's their biggest bang. Just like every other retail store, right after kind of Thanksgiving is when they're finally not dying in debt. It's when they finally hit the black. So, okay. Do we want to do a summary?
Yeah. Do you want to do it this time? I think I did the last one.
Sure.
Okay. 1 second. Okay. Go for it.
Okay. So this case is about Rent the Runway, which is 2 MBA, Harvard MBA graduates started a company about renting designer dresses, so that a person, I always want to call them patients, because all the people I deal with are patients, a lady could rent a dress for one evening to go out and be able to not have to wear the same thing. They kind of did a little bit of market research and discovered that if a person or a lady wears her own outfit out, she gets about 2 compliments a night if she wears something that she had rented. she ends up getting about 12 compliments per night. So there is a bonus. There's, compliments make people feel good. So there
Yeah.
kind of establishes like, this is great. They, what else was I going to say? Their business model seemed to work. They did it at an extremely fast pace, kind of got this company up and going in less than a year. And had some, pretty good cash flow, but kind of stumbled along with their presentation to designers of trying to decide what their mission was, what their passion was, and what their statement of the reason why you guys should allow us to take your dresses, buy them at a discount, and then rent them to people. They didn't seem to be pretty clear on their presentation to people, but I think after a while they were able to nail it down and get it better to be able to get more designers to understand what their idea was behind it. They kind of come to a crossroads of whether they were deciding whether they needed to scale up quickly now or address their operational problems. They did have some operational problems with inventory, sending and receiving, making sure the dresses were clean, that kind of deal. Most of the customers were still pretty happy. It did prove that there is a demand for this type of market, but we voted that they need to address their operational issues before they scale up, because the operational issues are just going to come back to haunt them. And whether they have 1,000 dresses or 10,000 dresses, the problems aren't going to go away unless they fix them. So I think that's the summary.
I think you nailed it.
Okay, good.
Awesome. Should I stop it?
Yeah.
Yeah.